What's going on, everybody? It's Los here. We back on the throne of positivity, where the first is last and the last is first. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and also the notification bell so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. Thank you to everybody who's supporting the ministry. You are amazing. May God bless you abundantly in your life for your faithfulness. Trust and believe that God is not mocked. You will reap what you have sown. So today I want to go in several directions dealing with the same kind of topic, right? Man and woman, husband, wife, single, leading to marriage. I want to get into the dating, courting differences, and then what should we be aiming at, and then what does that look like getting into marriage, and then finally walking in that. In regard to all of the things that we have been discussing so far, it feels like we are going in a specific direction. So I want to continue to apply whatever knowledge I have gained over the years and just help you as best as possible. Hopefully you guys are finding this helpful and you can implement these things in your life. And I want to encourage you, like wherever you are, if you're single, if you're married, if you're courting or dating, wherever you are, God is with you. He meets us where we are, but he doesn't leave us as we were. He continuously is working on us so that we can be changed, that we can be transformed. And I think it's important for us to recognize that God is asking more of us every single day. He wants us to be transformed, so we need to be willing to be transformed. So currently we already have a video out on singleness. That was more so of an encouragement for people who, it was Valentine's Day on that Wednesday, and I know that that's a difficult day for a lot of people. So more so that video was an encouragement than actually instruction. So we'll get into that a little bit more. And then we have a video for men. What does it mean to be a man of God? 2 videos on that. Then we have 2 videos on women. And then finally, we have a video on an answer to the devil's schemes and how becoming one is spiritual warfare. It's the plan of God that the devil is obviously trying to disrupt. But I think that we can combat that just on the simple basis of walking into what God has already laid out. We are going to overcome. We are going to succeed. Like, it's so incredible because God, he already has laid it out for us. The plan is there. So the devil is obviously trying to distort that. He's trying to disrupt the plans of the Lord. But I think oftentimes we overcomplicate things and we think that things are more complex than what they are. And I think that's just a natural human tendency, is to complicate things more than they need to be, because that's just what we do. But if we go back to the simplest things, the foundation, and then build up from that, I think naturally we're just going to walk into victory. But naturally doesn't mean easily. So that's something that we have to have a righteous expectation on, is that there are things that need to be worked on. God is going to help us through all of that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start talking about singleness. I really want to go over the dating and courting, and then from dating and courting into like those preparing for marriage type of ideas and what can we do there. So with singleness, I live by the philosophy that it's better to be prepared than to get prepared, or it's better to be ready than to get ready. I think this is true in so many aspects of life, and the only way we can truly live that out is through discipline. Discipline is discipline is doing what you hate as though you love it. And discipline truly is the ultimate self-love. And what I've learned through discipline is freedom actually comes from surrender and bondage. Now, that sounds strange because it's like, how can I be free if I'm in bondage? That makes no sense. But anybody who has ever allowed themselves to be lazy, or you've ever gotten in a rut where you're just lazy, you're not productive. I mean, it happens to all of us, unless I'm just the only lazy one that is me, and all of y'all need to intervene, all right? But when you get into a rut of laziness, it almost feels like although you're free, right? If you want to procrastinate, you're free in the sense of the moment, but eventually you will find yourself in bondage, because all of a sudden you can't break free from that laziness. And then it's like, what's going on? I'm just in chains to laziness. So if instead of being lazy and trying to experience temporary liberation through putting things off, if you would shackle yourself to discipline and deny yourself through self-control, then although you are shackled in a sense to the discipline that is, you're doing the things that you don't want to do, right? Like, what stops me from eating 7 donuts in the morning? It's like, probably because I shouldn't do that. So discipline shackles me in a sense to my virtues, to self-control, to knowing that I need some type of barrier to guide my life. And in so doing, I have true freedom. It's like what Jesus says, like, he who seeks to gain his life shall lose it, but he who loses his life for my sake shall gain it. I think that's something important that I want you to implement into your life with singleness, is that if you would lay your life down before Christ and lose it, ultimately you're receiving liberation. But you have to recognize that we were created to worship. So in some sense, we are subjugated beings. We are beings that thrive in subjugation. And we don't like this terminology because of our history and things that have happened in the world. But the reality is that human beings thrive in subjugation. When I can subjugate myself to a goal and say, this is the way that I want to achieve this thing, then I can thrive in that, because I can follow the direction of the vision or the purpose of which I am trying to accomplish, right? If I subjugate myself to the idea that I will go to school and graduate, then what am I doing if not falling under the authority of the goal and the purpose that I have for the future? And what does that look like if not submitting to what I know I need to do so that I may succeed? That means studying. That means getting into groups, acknowledging my peers and coordinating with them, getting into connection with my professors and creating a repertoire or some type of relationship with them so that I have access to them, doing all the things that are necessary in this disciplined and subjugated way that will lead to what? The acquisition and the completion of the goal. And then finally, what? We're free, because we're no longer subjugated to that. But then we will be subjugated to something in the future. So why is this important in singleness? It's kind of a weird direction to go. And with these things, guys, I hope you noticed that with my videos, as I mentioned before, I'm very unorthodox. I'm not conventional. I don't like thinking about things the way they've been thought about for thousands of years. That doesn't mean we got to change things, because obviously if they've endured over time, there's some type of validity to them. However, like, there's already a whole pool of voices that are out there telling you this is what you should do in singleness and whatever. Rather than just list things out for you, what I'm really trying to do with these videos is I want to teach you how to think for yourself. And I hope that you don't think that I don't think that you know how to think for yourself, but I'm trying to just present to you things in a very dynamic way so that you can grab the pieces and take them and do with it what you believe is best for you in your life. So in regard to this thing of subjugation and self-control through discipline, relating that to singleness, the reason why I think that is so important is because you're going to have to deny yourself. You're going to have to subjugate yourself to the Lord and say, I'm willing to lose my life so that I may gain it. Singleness is the time of sacrifice. It is the time of learning to submit to God. And through learning to submit, giving up your life, when you finally get to the place where you meet the person that God has for you, now you already have a track record of submission to the Lord, of relinquishing your desires in a sense, and not so much the good desires. Like, you have trained and you have been controlled in your discipline of like, nah, I can't just eat however I want. I can't live however I want. I can't think and act however I want. I recognize that I'm under the influence of God Almighty, and I have to submit to that to some degree. Well, not to some degree, hopefully all degrees, but in some degree, I'm going to have to do that when I meet my spouse, right? So again, the reason why I'm bringing this up is I really try to study my lineage and my genealogy. And when I look at my family, again, what I see, even in the best attempts, is failure. And not failure like they failed at life, but failure in the sense that the results that were acquired in our family, they happened. Why? There was a failure to deny self. And again, like if we don't deny ourselves, the failure to say, I can't just do whatever I want, I have to sacrifice the present on the altar of desire for the future that has been promised. And what does that mean, right? For example, if God promised Abraham and Sarah a child, they had to sacrifice their desire for the child for the future that was promised. However, we know how the story goes. They didn't sacrifice on the altar of desire. What they did rather was they sacrificed on the altar of disobedience, brought in Hagar, and then created a whole other lineage that was never part of the plan of God. Now, God worked that out because God is merciful and he knows how to deal with our faults, our past, our insecurity. God understands that we come from dust. Psalm 103. He remembers that we are but a breath. So he knows our fickle and feeble nature, and he's going to work those things ultimately for our good. But for the sake of him working it for our good doesn't mean that we should be disobedient. We should try to be blameless as much as possible, because then God will truly, truly bless us. So because they sacrificed on the altar of disobedience, that's what happened, and it created problems. Yet God brought the trajectory back onto course in Isaac. So that's what we have to do when we are going through singleness, is that we need to see, what is our North Star? What is God pointing us to? Where is that promised future? And are my actions, are my desires, are my plans, is my way of life in line with that North Star? Is it in line with that promised future? And if he can promise it, then he can complete it. We always have to stack these things against that promise to see if they will stand or fall. Because when you're going through life as a single person, right, oftentimes there's so many worries, there's so many anxieties. I mean, everybody has this, so it's natural, it's part of our nature. But the thing that I think often spirals out of control is that we don't know how to deal with our anxiety, or at least I felt that way for the longest of time, until I really recognized what's the purpose of anxiety and worry. It's not that it's a necessity of life, but it's just an inevitability of life. And as a single or anybody else, if you can see anxiety as an inevitability, when it comes up, you can now see an opportunity. And I've really learned this morning. It's currently Monday, March 18th, and it's like 9:10 in the morning. And just before recording, I felt this overwhelming sense to write a community post. So check that out. And one of the things that God really taught me this morning, waking up with anxiety and then going through what we did this morning, you can read the post again, is that anxiety is not something to worry about. I know that sounds oxymoronic, but the reality is that anxiety is not something to worry about. Anxiety is something to recognize and then see the opportunity that God is presenting you. Because ultimately what the anxiety is an insecurity. There's something that you're insecure about. And if that's an insecurity, if you look at it on the building blocks of God building your house, that means that something about your house that's being built up is weak and needs strengthening. So if I can look at my anxiety and say, okay, I need to trust God more in this area. So rather than just being anxious and not knowing why and like spiraling out of control and being worried about being worried and being anxious about being anxious, and then you just like, oh my God, I'm going out of control, I'm losing my brain. You know, you need to kind of create a distance from it and separate yourself from anxiety and say, okay, this is natural. And if it's natural, then let me see, why am I anxious? Okay, I'm anxious because of this. Okay, I'm lacking trust. Well, then what are all the ways that I can trust God then? What can I do to actually grow? And then start attacking that. This is an opportunity to deal with your fear. And I promise this has some, this is going somewhere leading towards dating and courting. I know it's so unorthodox, but if you can see the anxiety in this way, you know, psychologists, what they say, if you have a deep fear, let's say a phobia, the way to overcome that is to introduce the fear little by little with increasing doses or confrontations of the fear. So for example, if I'm afraid of heights, which even talking about it, but my heart is like a little bit trembling. You have to confront that more and more. And what's so ironic about me being afraid of heights is I find this like so exhilarating. Like ever since my youth, I've been afraid of heights, but I've always loved confronting it by being the first one on the roller coaster or doing those drops or those elevator drops, whatever, all those rides. I love roller coasters. But if you do that little by little, confronting your fears, you overcome it. And what was once your fear now becomes your confidence. You are no longer afraid because you've confronted that which was in the darkness, and you've come to realize, okay, there was nothing in the darkness to be afraid of in the first place. What does this have anything to do with singleness and then getting ready for courting or dating and then leading to marriage ultimately? And I think the reason why this has so much importance in your singleness to really get a grip on these things is because how many of us are really afraid of the future? Probably all of us. This isn't exclusive to singles, but I'm trying to progress this along, and I'll address each group as we get further and further. But starting from that point of singleness, what do we fear? Is this the person that God has for me? Can I trust this person? Is this person reliable? Do I want to give my heart to them? How can I overcome my fear of love? Will they accept me? Am I too quirky? Am I too crazy? Am I too weird for this woman? Like, you know, is she gonna really accept me? Will she love me the way that I love her? Will this be reciprocal? Is this going to be unbalanced? You know, will she love my family the way that I loved her family or love her family? You know, these are all like a cloud of weight of like things that just press upon your soul. And then again, it spirals out of control. So if you can learn to take these things one by one, like whatever question it may be, does she love me, for example? I need to pick that from the cloud, and then I need to hold it right before me and say, will she love me? Is this really the question that I need to answer? This is the question that's being posed either by my flesh or even by the enemy. But the question is not the question that needs to be answered. All these worrying thoughts need to be brought and presented before the Lord. And you really need to ask the question, can God be trusted? And if God's promises are yes and amen, and they are unbreakable, and he will not renege nor void his covenant, then the question now becomes what I wrote in Sunday's post yesterday. You have to ask the question, is God's anger forever? Has God forgotten his promises? Like, you really need to ask these questions instead of worrying about them over here. You need to now direct them before the Lord in his presence for him to deal with that. So is God unfaithful? So just to give you a more specific question, one of the things that we're gonna have to wrestle with, that I've dealt with for years, and I feel like, you know, the most fruitful harvest I have reaped from struggling in this way in the most beautiful way, is that we always want to ask, can we trust that person? And there has been no greater confidence for me in the word of God than bringing that before the Lord. Can I really trust this person? And God answering me, can you trust me? That's ultimately where the question lies. So the way that God has answered this to me, I remember this was like 3 years ago. 2 years ago, he brought me to Proverbs 31. A faithful wife who can find, or a woman of God who can find. She's far more valuable than rubies and gold and treasures. And the heart of her husband trusts in her. She will do him good and not harm all the days of his life. And to answer this question, whenever anything came in opposition of me trusting her, or having to ask the question, can I trust if the situation is so contrary to it? I always go back to that. I always go back to the heart of her husband trusting her. And then even deeper than that, the only reason that the heart of her husband can trust in her, in reality, in a subtle and indirect way, is because the heart of her husband trusts in God. And if we can trust in God, we can trust in the person. And then all these other factors, because she's a valuable woman of God, a fearful woman of God, and she is worth far more than rubies and gold, her actions, her doing good to her husband all the days of his life, is ultimately what adds substance to it. But its origin is found in trusting in God first. Are you guys following me in all of this? Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we need to deal with these things in singleness. And I'm trying to avoid saying things that I have already said, like, get ready. It's better to be ready than to get ready. And then saying, like, be a husband before being a husband, being a wife before being a wife, be a father or a mother before being a parent. We've already gone down that route. So I'm trying to give you some practical ways of how you can gain confidence to continue to wait on the Lord. Because Psalm 27:13-14, David says one of the most fascinating things. He starts by saying, I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of God in the land of the living. And then he tells his heart, be strong and courageous. Wait for the Lord. I think it's so important that David is saying this, because he starts with, I believe, meaning that he's not seeing it yet, but he has faith that he shall see it. Like, it's incredible that he has this type of faith. And then he tells his heart to take courage so that he can wait upon the Lord. So we need to get into faith. We need to understand, like, what direction are we actually going, and how can I have confidence in regard to the future? Now we're going to transition into, dating and courting and stuff like that. I've been dealing with our anxieties and, like, the insecurity that can arise with not knowing, right? Like, that's the biggest fear that we have, is the unknown. We hate what we cannot conquer. I've laid out to you how you can trust God. Now, if you believe that you can trust God, and you can believe that you shall see the goodness of God in the land of the living, and you can command to your soul and your heart, be strong and courageous, wait for the Lord, and you tell your soul, praise the Lord, oh my soul, then that last piece, wait for the Lord, is going to be not easier, but it's going to make more sense to you. Now, I don't know if I have explained how I see what has been my perspective in waiting on God for marriage and the woman that he has for me, but it's absolutely extreme. And I really think it's only the 1% of the 1% are actually going to do this, because I understand how incredibly impossible this is. But I want to explain it, and then we'll get into courting and dating. I've mentioned it briefly on lives and in one of the previous videos with what my wife taught me about impossibility. So when I came to God, I recognized, like, whoa, coming to God, now I understand the sovereignty of God. And I think that's something that we often overlook, is the sovereignty of God. If God is truly sovereign, then his purpose is his purpose. When I came to God, again, I know people don't agree with this. We have the idea of soulmate in the world, but I truly believe in that idea. And the reason why I believe in it is because I truly believe that God has a specific vision and a purpose for all of our lives. If that is true, then I believe there is a person out there that God desires you to be with. Now, you have the free will to choose and do whatever you want. But, and again, like, if you want to be like, take things into your own hands and do whatever, like God is going to bless you. The world is unique. We are all in different situations. That complicates things. However, I always understood that there was a woman out there for me. This woman of my dreams, like, she's been in my heart since a child, which is crazy to think about. Ever since I was a child, I remember my earliest thoughts. You know, when kids play together, I always played dad. I always played teacher, or I always played husband. And this woman has always been in my dreams. And I would remember laying down as a kid, as early as 5, 6, 7 years old. I would be in my bed and I would be hugging my pillow as if hugging my wife. And I didn't know what this even really meant. I just saw the way that my father loved my mother. And that ingrained such a beauty within me that, I saw the way my mom relinquished herself in my father's hands, and the trust that was there. And the example that they gave me, I still to this day have yet to see. And I really believe that that woman has been in my heart since a child. And where does that come from? Did a child just create this on their own? You could say, well, yeah, you're a product of your environment and this is whatever. You could say that, and I can understand that. But I don't think that it explains the intrinsic. I know this may not be a word, but I'm going to make it up. The intrinsicity of it, referring to the intrinsic nature of her being in my heart. Like, it originates in my soul, and it was amplified and multiplied by the example that I saw in my home. I've always felt like there was one woman out there for me. Nobody else was supposed to be for me. It was her. So when I came to Christ, I recognized, okay, I've always had this thing of my woman in my heart and my soul. And then now there's the sovereignty of God. Those things marry perfectly. And I find it so unfortunate that Christians believe in the sovereignty of God all the way up until their decision to choose a person. When it comes to the sovereignty of God, people believe in the sovereignty of God for where they end up living, what car they may end up driving, the food they may even eat, the dog they want to choose, the cat, whatever, like all these weird areas, like whatever job they want to get. They understand that ultimately God has control, and then all these other things, except for when it comes to the most important decision in their lives. And I think that's why we are in the situation that we are in this country currently, with divorce rate being the same in the church, if not higher than it is outside the church. And I really believe it's because we have no respect for the process of leading to marriage, because we really think that we have control in that decision. And this is what even dug me deeper to relinquish all control and say, Father, I leave my heart, my mind, my body, my soul, my spirit, my desire, my plans, my decisions, everything, I'm going to leave it in your hands. And I want you to take control. I want you to make the decision for me, because I refuse to make that decision. And I know it sounds impossible, but I'll explain why this was so important to me when the intersection between believing that there was one woman out there for me and the sovereignty of God. The reason why this is so important to me, and I'm trying to convince you to ultimately leave it in God's hands and let him decide for you. But before I say that, let me qualify that when I say that I'm leaving it in God's hands, what I'm saying is, yes, it's in God's hands, but I see, and I have always seen, that eventually God will bring it back into my hands. Not negating his sovereignty, nor saying I'm going to take it from his hands, but that if he's going to instruct me in the way that I should go, with his eyes upon me, and the footsteps of the righteous are ordained, that means that little by little, he's going to keep his hands involved, but eventually give that transfer, almost the same way that I explained that my father-in-law one day will have to give that transfer of authority and responsibility. In the same way, my Heavenly Father has to do that for his daughter. This is why I'm always praying to the Lord. I'm like, Father, I can't wait to love your daughter. There'll be like 15-minute straights that I'll be in prayer and I'll be like, Father, I can't wait to love your daughter. I can't wait to love that woman, my Father. And I'll say, your daughter, your daughter, your daughter, because I recognize that ultimately she is his daughter. And he's preparing me as a man. And again, this goes back to the singleness, preparing me as a man, or you as a man, you as a woman. And if you leave it in God's hands, then he can prepare everything around that, building up your house to eventually give you the keys so that you can walk in. And it's not about forgetting his sovereignty, but now there's a role of responsibility and accountability that you will have to implement that which he has taught you through wisdom while leaving everything in his hands. Because if you leave these important decisions in his hands until he gives it back to you, then that frees you up to let go of the most important decision in your life, to then prepare for that person. Prepare yourself in a way. Going back to, can my heart trust in my wife? It's like, no, what's more important than can my heart trust my wife is, am I a man that she can trust? It goes even before that question. So that's how I've been living my life. It's like, I want to become a man that she can trust. And I'm going to get back to the thing, I swear. To the original inquiry. What I've recognized being here in this condo, I've really been alone, and it's allowed me to thrive in life, because it really does cause a lot of anxiety to be alone. But being able to confront that, it's helped me develop a lot. And I've recognized, like, yo, I can really become that man. And in surrendering myself and trusting God, I've seen how when you really trust somebody, and this is why I want to be trustworthy to her, I've learned that by God being the ultimate authority and confidence of trust, it has allowed me to unravel in his presence in authenticity, blamelessness, and really strive to please him in ways unimaginable otherwise if I did not trust him. And if that's true of my relationship with God, then I need to provide that for my wife so that she can do the same with me, that she can unravel herself, in a sense, unveil herself and be vulnerable and exposed before me and trust me with that vulnerability. I swear I'm getting back to the leaving it in God's hands thing. I was really thinking about the dynamic between a man and a woman, and why is it so mesmerizing? Why is it so attractive? Why is it so alluring? The culmination, or the intersection, the marriage, or the attraction, right? Why are we drawn to each other, right? Why am I drawn to my wife, and why is she drawn to me? I think that there's a lingering threat of danger. And I thought about this, and I know that sounds very weird, but I think that the most beautiful things in the world threaten. And I know that sounds weird. And why am I saying this? Because remember I told you guys that I can't wait for the day that I'm married to my wife, and I just want to buy the most expensive brush and just brush her hair. I want that to be a significant part of our marriage and our life, because I think what is so precious about that, when I was reflecting with God after telling you guys that, I think what is so mesmerizing about that, both for me and for her, is the threat that is present there. Because as the man, I have the power, and as the woman, she has the innocence and fragility. Not weakness, but fragility, the softness, vulnerability, and her body, her mind, her soul being exposed to me. And there's the lingering threat that I can destroy her in my hands. And I know this sounds so weird, but I hope that you can understand. And there's a threat in her way to me, in that by me opening myself to receive her, there's the threat of the betrayal, right? But in us coming into agreement, and me relinquishing the power to destroy, and her relinquishing the power to deceive, now those things are out of the equation, and all we're left with is beauty. And I think, again, why this is so beautiful is because if you think about anything that's beautiful in the world, there's the lingering threat. Why is the sunrise in the morning so beautiful? Because it threatens darkness. Why is it that the way that the ocean waves caresses the seashore is so fascinating to us? Because the ocean threatens the land, that it will destroy it. But somehow, through the wisdom of God and his power, it is abated. So there's this lingering unknown that makes these things beautiful. And the surrender of the power to her, me giving my power and saying, here, I'm giving it to you, and her giving me the power of surrender and putting it into my hands, that's where the most beautiful thing is created. But that beauty can only be found because we have relinquished those things, but not just relinquishing them, we have surrendered it all to God, and now God is there, and the guarantee is God. Now it goes back to my initial reason for leaving things in God's hands. The reason why it's so beautiful is that threat of whatever divorce or uncertainty, it's all out of the window. I will never have to worry about it if I truly leave it in God's hands and let him make the impossible possible. Now, how does that make sense? And what is my biggest encouragement for you to do this, for me to do this, and for my wife to do this? If I build my house on the rock, I've told you this before. You should remember me saying this. I know you remember. If I don't focus on my wife's beauty, although she is beautiful and her beauty is divine and it connects me to God's divinity, the softness of looking at her in my eyes, wishing to drink of her physical beauty. If I don't focus on that, but I look at the inward character of her true beauty that radiates with the power of 1,000 suns through her smile, then I can see her gentleness, her kindness, her mercy, all of these things. And that will be one of the pillars of our marriage. But if I leave this in God's hands and I let God build it upon the rock that is Christ Jesus, then I can throw anything at that decision and it will be destroyed, because now we're founded on the rock that is Christ. But even deeper than this, the reason why I really relinquish this in the hands of God is when marriage happens, it's the most important decision that we will ever make in our lives. So we should be very serious in this and take our time and be wise, right? Leaving it in God's hand. But it's also the most threatening. It's also the most dangerous union, because if you really think about it, I've never understood how people say relationships are 50-50. That makes absolutely no sense. The Bible says the two shall become one. That means there's a whole individual and a whole individual becoming one. So it's not two halves filling the same space. It's two singular beings that are being joined together to become one. How much resistance, how much friction are we going to experience? A lot. And these things can fester. They can cause conflict, and we need to resolve that. And what I've recognized studying marriages is, like, people will always attack the marriage. I'm talking about the husband and the wife. And when they have to attack it, they're going to go back to the decision they made. And if you made this decision yourself and you didn't take all measures to leave it in God's hands and lead you to the person that he has for you, when the problems arise that threaten your marriage, you go and you attack the decision. You go back and attack the foundation. So if you made the decision yourself, you can justify it, because you'll be like, okay, maybe I wasn't in my right mind. Maybe I was too young to make this decision. Maybe this or maybe that. Maybe. Okay, now I can justify this, because obviously I'm not the same person. Obviously I'm wiser. Obviously I'm this, I'm that. So this marriage, this union no longer makes sense. Let's dissolve this. We made the decision and I can attack that decision. Now there's no more union. However, if you truly allow this to be in the hands of God, when the problems arise that seem unresolvable, no matter how hard we try, no matter how much we seek the Lord, it seems like it's not getting better, then what we can do is make the decision. And I know this sounds strange. We can attack the decision we made. Wait, but there's something different. Now, before, when I attacked the foundation, it was akin to attacking a sandcastle. It was the decision that I made, so I can destroy this. Try to punch that rock that is Jesus Christ and see what happens to your hand. Oh, okay, maybe God is sovereign. Maybe God has more wisdom than me. Maybe God knew everything we would face and he saw the out and how we would conquer and overcome. Because we must recognize that life is just about ups and downs. And this is something that, for the last few videos, I've been painting a beautiful picture for my wife and inviting her in. Like, mommy, come. This is what I'm trying to show you. This is what you have to look forward to. I've been careful to tell her, like, let's not over romanticize that, because the reality of life and marriage is that we're gonna have these really big ups and downs, which she should already have recognized that that's what we've been living anyways, right? So I think it's so beautiful how God has been working this out even before her and I ever meet, before we're ever brought to that altar, is that he brought all the conflict before our marriage to be worked out in that time. And because we've been able to deal with such of the most egregious and possible things, those confrontations and being able to manage that conflict without being able to communicate to each other, right? Because we don't know each other. We haven't been able to talk. Only through prayer, we have been forced to go right back to God. And in wanting to turn around or maybe wanting to give up, God always points us back to the marriage. And now we meet in the presence of God again. So you see how, like, if we attack the decision, we need to attack the decision so that we could see we're going to God and we're like, Lord, what's going on? And he turns you right back to the decision of leaving it in God's hands. So since our marriage was founded on that truth, now we go back to attack the decision. And what do we have? We have the foundation that's the rock of God, that we will not be overcome because he can't be overcome. So imagine having that much rigidity, that much stability, infinite possibility of that. Now, although we will have conflict, we can overcome. We will resolve these things. And this is the beauty that is that I'm so excited of, that I feel like I'm reaping a harvest of things that I never understood. Why was I going through the last 4 years in the way that I was? But when I look at it now and I see how much stronger this marriage and relationship is, and how much he has developed the intimacy in ways unimaginable. And again, this is theatrical, guys. I'm talking about my heart, my soul, my spirit, and personal relationship with God in respect to that woman, wherever she is. I love you, mommy. I love you, Babu. So that she can know, like, this is the level of confidence she can have. Like, we have built our house on the rock, and no matter what happens, the truth will come to the light and God will show. Boom, this was why you were crying all those thousands of sleepless nights. This is why those situations arise. This is why the devil meant it for evil, but God turned it for good. This is why God put our enemies in our hands so that we can learn. Look at how God allowed us to resolve these things, how he had mercy and faithfulness on us. Now when he puts these things in our hands, we need to operate in that mercy and that goodness that he has shown us. Because are we in the place of God? Absolutely not. So if you have this perspective, right, leaving it in God's hands, how does that correlate to dealing with dating now? I'm gonna say this right now. I don't believe in dating at all. That's thrown out of the window. Dating is a new invention of humanity over the last 200 years, and it has caused nothing but headaches. I believe that courting is the solution, and I'll explain that. No qualification needs to be made other than courting is dating, except that you have the full intention to meet at that altar. So I'm not trying to paint the picture too specifically for you because it's different for everybody. We need to have the commitment and the agreement. This is what we know we want, and this is the goal that we're aiming for. I don't think that process should be prolonged. Me, I've even left it in the hands of God to be like, Lord, I want to meet this woman at the altar. I don't want to date her, Lord. I want to court her. And if courting her is us never meeting and us having a Rebecca and Isaac type of testimony, which that's something that has always been in my heart because I'm a hopeless romantic, and I think that's one of the most beautiful stories in the Bible. I've asked God, let the spiritual be our courtship. Let these these videos that I'm making, let it be our courting and us getting to know each other. And then the live sessions could be like our little dates or whatever, right? When I'm teaching Monday through Friday, 3 o'clock, shameless plug. Let that be how you build this up. And then we're getting to know each other without knowing each other. We're being intimate without being intimate. And God is leading us to that altar. And I know none of this makes sense, but I really want to change your perspective on these things, because the impossible can be possible. The unknown can be known without knowing, if that makes sense. And when it comes to this courting, I think, again, you shouldn't prolong that season. Again, I really believe that I want to meet my wife at the altar, and I'm fully willing to invest everything completely in God's hands, trusting him fully that I've already committed to him. I know what it is to be a spouse because he's my spouse. I know how to love because he loved me first. So everything that was a question mark first, they were answered in him. The promise of God find their yes and amen in him. Therefore, I don't need anything from her, if that makes sense. Like all the things that we think we need. Oh, I need to know her middle name. I need to know her address. I need to know her dreams and her visions. And I need to know, are we compatible? I need to know this. All these question marks. It's like, no, I've already left that in his hands. So I can confidently go to the altar like Rebecca and Isaac and just commit fully, because the marriage is a commitment. It's saying yes. It's just saying yes. So you know, to my wifey, like, hey, start preparing. Like, where do you want to get married? What is the venue? What's the dress? What's the colors? How many guests are we going to have? What's the budget? And then, you know, like, of course, I'm a guy. So, you know, we always on our thing. I'm looking forward to it. I just want to say, let's consider that the wedding is beautiful. It's a ceremony, is everything. And that thing is going to be crazy. I'll be watching people's testimony and they was talking about how hectic it is. And I always hear married couples say invest fully in the honeymoon after, because that's really where we'll get to know each other. So I'm just saying, boo, know where you want to go. I don't care. I'll go anywhere with you. I just want to be with you. I want like 2 to 3 weeks in intimacy and isolation away from the world with you. I don't care where in the world we go. I just want to get to know you for those 2 to 3 weeks. Yup, 2 to 3 weeks. Yup. We've been apart for too long. I think we can handle 2 to 3 weeks in isolation. So start thinking about those things by faith, because hope seen is not hope at all. So we wait in faith of that which is unseen, because it's the substance of what we hope for. So let's start walking these things out. Start thinking about all the details, get them ready, because I really believe God is going to bless us, man. I feel like 2024 is our year, boo-boo. But anyways, guys, I think that the courting stage, don't prolong it. And I think you should get married as soon as possible. It didn't happen for me because I don't think that I was ever prepared in regard to maturity. I always wondered, like, why didn't God marry me back in 2012 when I was first asking him for a wife? Like, really, as coming closer to God, I was praying for my wife, because I just started getting into relationship with God. I was like, why not then? Why not when he gave me the dream in 2013, when he showed me my firstborn child and the name of my wife? Why not back then? I don't know where she was in the world, and physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, mature wise. Back then, she could think about it. Like, was she ready? I know I wasn't ready, and it would have created so much more problems that now that I'm 31, I feel so much more mature, and I'm ready to be handling the responsibility that God has placed in my hands. So for each man and woman, wherever you find yourself, if you're young, get married soon. Just work on your maturity as you're preparing for these things. And if you find yourself later in life like myself and still single, just have hope and have faith. Continue to prepare yourself too. The answer to our problems in regard to society is like, we're prolonging things far longer than they have to be. As a man, you feel like you have to have a certain amount of money in the bank account. You got to have an apartment. You have to have this. You have to have that. And it's like, what's the bare minimum of what you need before you go? I don't think there is, because this is about your life together, and you're going to build that up together. So it's not about what you have, it's what you're preparing for and how you're preparing to walk in that, and how are you walking into it now. So when I'm looking at the man that's going to be for my daughter, or the woman for my son, I'm not looking at what they have. I'm looking at their potentiality and how are they walking in maturity currently. Because whatever they lack together they're gonna get that, and they need to learn how to get that. So if I have a man who comes from poverty and he doesn't have anything, no matter what background, I'm looking at, can he really handle being a man? Not looking at, oh, does he live with his parents? That doesn't matter. Is he working? Does he have dreams and goals? Is he working towards something? Is he responsible? What's his relationship with God look like? And then for the woman, the same thing on that side. Is she mature? Will she take care of her household? And then whatever finances, like, remember, like, why am I trying to build myself up first? It don't make sense. 2 incomes are better than 1. So if you come together, you have more time to have 2 brains be working on the single solution. The Bible says, how can 2 walk together unless they agree? A rope of 3 cords is not easily broke. So why do we prolong these things? I know why I did, because I don't know why I did. It just ended up that way. I was just too immature. And God forced me to maturity. Hopefully this was helpful. I think that there's a lot for you guys to think about here. And again, I'm trying to help you think about these things, not necessarily lay out a 10-step program of how to get to these things. I just want to present it to you so that you can implement it in your own life how you see fit. The greatest thing that I want to leave you with is discipline, self-control, losing your life to gain it, whatever that means in your singleness and marriage courting, and then faith, right? I'm trying to show you how much faith I am by like believing these things, speaking to that which doesn't exist as if it were, only doing what I saw my Father doing in heaven, and then speaking to that woman of my dreams. Like, I'm really preparing this, all these videos, all these live sessions. I see it as an opportunity or as a reality that I'm getting to know this woman without getting to know her, because God is going to do what he does. And then one day I'm already walking in this. So it ain't nothing for God to say, you've been walking this way, she's been walking this way, but you've both been seeking me. And because you've been mature and responsible and obedient, when he brings us together, we've already been walking in it. Now we know how to walk it out. And the way that I could describe what I feel, even though I don't know this woman and she doesn't know me, I really do know her and she really does know me. And we know each other better than anybody else knows us. And I'm going to describe how this is. This is how I've always seen it. I'll never forget, this happened to me in September. I think it was September 17th or maybe like September 13th. It was like a Sunday or a Thursday. And I remember being in church and I was worshiping. And I'll never forget the vision that I had while worshiping. While in church, I'm talking about in San Diego, and this was in 2020, by the way. While worshiping, I swear something happened in the beginning from the first song. Boom, everything disappeared. And you know those salt flats? I'll put a picture here where it's like there's a little bit of water and it reflects the sky and it looks like glass. I was in something like that, but in darkness, in the universe with all the stars around me. And as I was worshiping and praising, because if you ever see me worshiping in church, like I'm like a beast, bro. I just be like, I be feeling it with my body. I can't sing and I don't think I could dance very well, but I try to praise God with my entire being. And that's what I was doing as I was walking these salt flats and this water, like walking on water with the universe and seeing all the stars in the sky. And God was walking near me like a transcendent being. Obviously he is, but he was with brilliant light. And as I'm worshiping, I was dancing and I was like moving. And then all of a sudden in the distance, I saw my wife. And when I'm looking at her, and as I'm moving, every move that I made, she made it in tandem with me. But what struck me as so odd was that this place, this environment, although God was next to me and he was next to her at the same time, I know this is contradicting, the entire environment signified the depth of God's presence. It was God's presence that we were in. And when I saw her, I was like, yo, I'm so used to being alone this deep in God. I saw her like way ahead of me. And although I fell in love that we were in tandem and we were dancing like to each other, but in reality, we were dancing to God and we didn't realize that we were dancing in tandem until we locked eyes. What so surprised me was that she was further in the Lord than I was. She was more intimate and closer to the heart of God than I was. That to me was the most incredible thing. So when I'm talking about all these things and how I'm preparing for them, I'm just thinking back to that. It's like, although we're on parallel paths, God is really bringing us together, and one day we will meet in his presence. So I just wanted to share that as something insightful, and hopefully that encourages you. I pray that this video was a blessing to you and it was very encouraging, and that you would make the decision to leave it all in God's hands. Leave it in his hands and let God work it out for you. He knows the desires of your heart. He knows the plans that you have, the decisions that you made, the past that you have endured, the things you have gone through, your pain, your heart, your hurt. Leave your desires, your plans, your hopes, your dreams, your decisions. Leave all of that in his hands and let God work it out, because what God has for you is way better than what you can do. So y'all know what it is. It's Los here. We on the throne of positivity where nobody shall dethrone us. And then again to my wifey, boo, mommy, my queen, I love you. And I hope you know that. But y'all know what it is. Peace. See you. Mañanas.